What did the law of Moses say about divorce and remarriage? This is the question that we seek to answer today as we continue our verse-by-verse study of the book of Deuteronomy on Walking Through the Bible.
Of his word, the glory of his cross.
If you have a Bible with you, turn to Deuteronomy chapter 24. We're going to be reading from verses 1 to 4. If you don't have a Bible, don't worry. Just follow along with us on the screen. The version that we'll be reading from is the New King James Version. So Deuteronomy 24, beginning of verse 1. When a man takes a wife and marries her, and it happens that she finds no favor in his eyes because he has found some uncleanness in her, and he writes a certificate of divorce, puts it in her hand, and sends her out of his house, when she has departed from his house, and goes and becomes another man's wife, if the latter husband detests her and writes her a certificate of divorce, puts it in her hand and sends her out of his house, or if the latter husband dies who took her as his wife, then her former husband who divorced her must not take her back to be his wife after she has been defiled, for that is an abomination before the Lord, and you shall not bring sin on the land which the Lord your God is giving you as an inheritance. In this and the next chapter, we have spelled out for us certain rights and duties under the law and how they would be treated. In the first 4 verses of this chapter, we have Moses' instructions on divorce. I'll put the verses back up on the screen for a moment to show that this is one sentence, and it is a conditional sentence at that. Why is that important? Because in Matthew 19:3 and 7, the Jews of Jesus' day has used this passage to teach that Moses had commanded divorce in his law, and some even went as far as to say that a man could divorce his wife for any cause. We'll get to that part in a moment, but for now let's realize that Moses was not establishing a commandment for divorce, for Genesis 2:24 had already established that marriage was to be for life. Instead, what he was doing was dealing with the question of what would happen if a divorced woman had married another and her second husband dies or divorced her too. Could she return to her first husband? The conditional sentence of this section can be divided into 2 clauses: the protasis, the clause containing the condition, and the apodosis, the clause containing the conclusion. Let's deal with the protasis first, which is found in verses 1 to 3, now on the screen. We start with a married couple, one who has become one flesh. Now there might come a time when the husband finds some uncleanness in his wife, so that she is not favorable to him anymore. What does that word uncleanness mean? To some of the Jews of Jesus' day, it meant any reason that the husband desired, such as not looking pretty anymore, or burning dinner, or some other thing. Such an interpretation, though, would go against the spirit of God's law on marriage from Genesis 2, because all women will get old. Everybody, women included, can make a dinner that doesn't taste good. And all women will at some point in the marriage do something that their husband doesn't like. So if divorce could be for any cause, divorce would be expected by God to be much more prevalent. But Jesus said in Matthew 19:8 that from the beginning, God's design was no divorce. He tolerated it, though, because of the hardness of man's heart. In other words, because of sin. Man was going to do it anyway, so God was going to regulate it. So if uncleanness wasn't any cause, what was it? It must have been something less than adultery, for that was punishable by death under the law of Moses. The word itself means a thing or matter of nakedness, something disgraceful or shameful. It could thus be flaunting herself in public immodestly. It could be going around enticing men to commit adultery with her, though not actually committing the act. It could also be being raped by another man. Though being raped was not the woman's fault, and the woman committed no sin, the hardness of some men's hearts cannot get over the fact that his wife had been violated, and so would like to seek an end to the marriage. Let's remember, though, that a husband can find some uncleanness in his wife and choose to remain married to her. This was not a command to divorce. If, however, he sought to divorce her, he must write her a certificate of divorce and send her away. As such, the divorce was not just a mental matter, it was a legal matter. From my research, these divorce certificates would contain the dates of the incidents, the cause for the divorce, and would be witnessed by others. As such, if the woman married again, the new husband would know that he was not stealing another man's wife, but that she was legally divorced. The next thing we must realize is that the divorced woman didn't have to marry again. she could remain unmarried. However, at that time, it might be difficult for the woman to make ends meet, so it would have been very common for her to want to remarry. Was such permitted under the law of Moses? Yes, it was permitted, but again, this was a concession by God. Continuing on, if the woman married again, her second husband might find some uncleanness in her and divorce her, or her second husband may die. What could this woman do then? Coming to verse 4 in the Apodosis, we find that she was barred from marrying her first husband because she had been defiled through her second marriage. This defilement could not be cleansed through some ritual washing. She was defiled forever due to the sexual relationship she had with her second husband. It does not mean that she couldn't marry ever again, but she couldn't marry her first husband once she married again. The fact that God declared the remarried woman perpetually defiled, though not an adulteress, shows his displeasure with divorce and remarriage and how it should have been avoided in Israel. The ban on remarriage to the first husband, though, did serve as a protection for the woman, for there was among the heathen of that time a practice known as wife swapping. This practice is just as it sounds. It is an abomination to God, for it degrades the importance and permanency of marriage. So in conclusion, Deuteronomy 24, verses 1 to 4 is not a command under the law of Moses to divorce one's spouse. Rather, it is concession by God to regulate a practice that was already occurring because of the hardness of man's heart, and remove what was a total abomination to him, the remarriage to the first husband of a woman who had been divorced and remarried. Today, we're not under the law of Moses. We're under the law of Christ. Divorce and remarriage is just as despised by God today as it was then. Jesus in Matthew 19:9 gave us our instructions for divorce. And I say to you that whoever divorces his wife except for sexual immorality and marries another commits adultery, and whoever marries her who is divorced commits adultery. Jesus' law removes the permission of the divorced person to remarry, whether they were put away for fornication or not. The only permission granted by God for remarriage after divorce is for the person who put away their spouse for fornication. If a person put away their spouse for any other reason and married again, they too would be committing adultery. This should give Christians pause when it comes to divorce. Our society doesn't bat an eyelid when it comes to divorcing one's spouse. God does. Thus, when all possible, divorce should be avoided and forgiveness should be offered. But whatever the case, let's follow God's law concerning divorce and remarriage always, in order for us to be pleasing in His sight. With that, our time is up for today. The Lord willing, we hope you'll join us for tomorrow's discussion of Deuteronomy 24, verses 5 to 13, as we continue our walk through the Bible, one verse at a time.
Thank you for watching today's episode. We hope that you found it edifying and ask that you not only subscribe to our channel and podcast, but that you like and share this episode among your friends, so that the saving gospel of Jesus Christ can go out to the whole world.
Of His cross.